Let's do it. Let's do it. Broadcasting from around the world, you're listening to The First 100, a podcast on how founders acquired their first 100 paying customers. Here's your host, Hadi Radwan.
Good to have you on the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Good to be here. Yeah, very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let me do a quick introduction for our listener. Sancar Sahin is the founder of Oliva, which is a health tech platform offering specialist on-demand mental health and well-being support to employees. And your company has raised 13 million euros from notable investors like Molten Ventures. And you've grown tremendously in the past year, more than 300%. You're in almost big chunk of the European markets, especially in the UK, and your app has around 38 languages that has been translated to. Notable customers as well are very famous Leapsome, Maze, and Marshmallow. Sanchar, give us your backstory. How did you end up in that space?
Yeah, so my background is leading marketing teams at fast growth startups. So probably the most notable was a company called Typeform, where I joined it as a very early employee. I built the marketing team from scratch there and led it for 4 years. So went from the kind of sub 500,000 ARR number and then left it at around 35, kind of 40 million ARR. So that kind of, very early stage journey from seed to Series B. And then I went on to do a similar thing at a company called Hotjar, which was at a similar stage, but was a fully bootstrapped company. So that was interesting to see it from a different angle, without the investors, but to still see that fast growth environment. And during my time at Typeform, it was an incredible journey, for my network, for my learning, for my friends, all of that kind of stuff. It was an incredible journey. And I think back very fondly on that time, but I did burn out pretty significantly during my time there. Not sure how much detail you want, but the way I realized was I went back home on a Friday after work, as I always did, ordered a takeaway curry for myself and my girlfriend, realized I made the wrong order, the wrong curry arrived, and it completely ruined my evening and my weekend, really, because I was just so annoyed at myself for this mistake. And that was the point that I realized that something wasn't quite right if I'm having that disproportionate reaction to the wrong takeaway curry. So that was actually the first time that I looked for a therapist, not on that Friday specifically, a little bit afterwards, but I looked for a therapist for the first time to try and understand what was going on, why I just wasn't feeling very mentally healthy. And it was the beginning of a very incredible journey of understanding myself, my past, my values, what gives me energy, what takes away energy, all of that kind of stuff. And all of that helped me understand why I ultimately burnt out at work and why I got to that point. Fast forward a couple of years, I was working for Hotjar, as I mentioned. The pandemic hit. That was obviously a very tough time for all of us. But my anxiety started to increase again. I could feel a lot of those same feelings that I had back when I originally burnt out. And I needed to kind of make a change. I was kind of doing the same things, and I realized that I needed to do something differently if I wanted to see a different result. So I looked for a purpose, and it just so happens that at that time, a friend of mine introduced me to who is now my co-founder, and said, you should talk. He was cooking up an idea around offering high quality mental health care and making it very accessible. And then we just started collaborating, and it became Oliva. And actually the three of us now, the person who introduced us and that person, we're now co-founders between us.
It's an incredible story because there's so many people who actually are suffering from burnout, but they don't know. It becomes like part of their day-to-day job. They become angry, anxious. They would have relationship issue. What are the triggers that someone should look for? Because I could be burnt out today, but I don't know because it's part of my day-to-day habits now. Is there specific things that, surfaced for you that someone can resonate with?
It's a great question. And take my answer with a pinch of salt because it's personal for everybody. But I can tell you, in my experience, the symptoms that I was experiencing, and having talked to a lot of people going through burnout or who have been through burnout, there are a lot of similarities. So things that I saw was I started to withdraw from everyday life and I was making excuses all of the time. So, let's say a friend had a barbecue or, there was an invite for a dinner or something like that. Everything felt like it was increasing my cognitive load. Like I just felt like I had no space in my head to think about even, shall I go to a barbecue? What shall I bring, etc. And when you feel like your head is that full up, you start making excuses. It's much easier just to say, no, I'm not going to that barbecue. And what you see, that's fine, one or two times, right? But if you see that you're just consistently doing that and you're putting off social events, then that's probably a signal for something. The other thing was I was getting very short with people. I was getting, angrier a lot quicker. I had very little patience, and obviously that has a negative impact on your relationship with everybody around you, but especially my girlfriend would have suffered the brunt of that. My dog at the time, she barked quite a lot, and I used to get so angry at my dog barking, and obviously that's not going to help. So I think, these are the kind of symptoms that I saw, but on top of that, just exhaustion. And the best kind of definition of burnout that I've heard before is if you imagine yourself as a battery. You're a battery that can be charged up and gets depleted. When you're mentally healthy, you still get exhausted. You get stressed, you get anxious, you get exhausted. If you've got like a really intense week or month or year at work, you're going to be exhausted, right? But you rest on a weekend, or you go on holiday, or you get a massage or whatever. You have these moments to recharge your battery, and you recharge, and then you can kind of go back into it in a healthy way. When you're burning out, your battery doesn't recharge anymore. You can take that weekend, you can take that extra day off, you can take that week off, but you just don't recharge. It's kind of like when your iPhone just stops charging and you need to get a new battery or a new phone. So that's the best definition I've heard, and that really connects with me. It didn't matter if I took a week off, a weekend off, if I went to a little weekend trip somewhere, I just couldn't recharge. I was still depleted of kind of thinking space and energy.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing this. You talked about starting your company. Take us back to the early days. What was the most important step that you had to make first? Would you create the product? Would you get the therapist on board, or would you get like first pilot customers to check if there's really a need here? And then also walk us through, how did you identify your ideal customer profile between SMEs, maybe mid-market, or even enterprise companies, large enterprise companies?
Yeah, so we actually, myself and my co-founder, we started by funding it ourselves. So we put in a bit of money ourselves. And we wanted to prove to ourselves that we could build a robust foundation that actually got good feedback from a small group of people. We weren't thinking about massive scale at that point. We just wanted to prove to ourselves we can build something that is better than what we had experienced ourselves. So we put in a little bit of money ourselves. We got a small team together, and we essentially built a mini kind of B2C offering for on-demand therapy. We wanted to make it really easy for a group of people to access therapy with no waiting lists, super high quality therapists, really good consumer technology experience. And ultimately, we wanted to listen to those customers, real paying customers, and say, do you think you got value for money? And we got really, really good feedback from that initial cohort. And that gave us the confidence to continue. And then we started raising for VC capital so that we could take this to the next level. And then we decided to make this into a B2B model, because we sat down and we thought, how do we get to as many people as possible? Is it through selling to the individual? Maybe, but the problem is cost is one of the biggest barriers to people accessing things like therapy and mental health care. So we asked ourselves, how can we completely remove that barrier for people? Well, let's go to their company. Let's get them to pay for the therapy. And then it's free at the point of use for the individual. So that model just made complete sense to us. And that was already happening in the US. It wasn't really happening in Europe as much, or the UK. But we knew there was a model in the US that was working along those lines. So that's how the whole thing got started, and that's kind of how we got into the B2B model and the venture capitalist side of things. And in terms of crafting our ideal customer profile, this has been an evolution, to be frank. It started as simple as businesses. Who will buy this thing? Let's just sell it to them. Then there was a kind of natural product market fit, I would say, with a particular type of customer. And in the early days, that was very much early stage startups, early adopters. They want to try new things. They want to bring in the next best thing in terms of offering employee benefits and things like that. That worked really well for us. But then the financial crash happened, and a lot of those startups were dying, essentially. They were struggling. They had no budget. They had no funding coming in. So we were like, okay, so this isn't a great ideal customer profile for us, because it's quite a rocky category of customers. So what we did was we took what we knew worked really well in terms of the fit we were seeing with those customers, and we looked at the characteristics of those customers. Why are they willing to buy? What is it they love about us, etc. And we just evolved our ideal customer profile from that. So our ideal customer profile today is really, it's still technology companies. It's still companies with a startup feel, but you would probably call them scale-ups more than startups. It's not the kind of seed round startups. It's Series A and beyond. It's, they've got a bit of revenue. They're pretty stable companies. So what we see is we've got a really good fit with high growth, global, modern, and importantly, talent-centric technology companies. The ones that really compete for talent. They really care about the quality of talent. They want to retain them, they want to engage them, and they want to attract them.
Amazing. So, the B2C model has its tactics. You can reach customers through different channels. The B2B also has its tactics. It's a longer sales cycle. Talk us about what channels worked for you, and then how did you identify within that organization who to start talking to, how to get through the gatekeeper, how to find the decision maker, and then how to find maybe the champion as well who would support you on this initiative?
Yeah, great questions. We're still working it out, but I can definitely share what we've learned so far. And this is why I love your podcast, because I think that first 100 customers, or first 50, first 150, whatever, that kind of first initial cohort is really, really important. And I think the tactics you use to get those are probably very different from the tactics you'll use to get your 500, 1,000 customers, etc. So the way that we thought about this was, first of all, from an ACV point of view, our average account value, what is it we're targeting? How much do we want to price and package what we're offering for? And what is our ideal ACV that we're targeting? That ACV essentially creates a map of potential channels. If it's below £5,000 or euros or whatever, it closes off a lot of channels. Let's take event sponsorship, for example. If you take an event that costs on average 10, 15,000 to sponsor, and you've got a 1,000 ACV product, you're going to find it quite tricky to make that an ROI positive initiative. So just by understanding your target ACV, you can open or close different channels. So we started with that. We basically just mapped out what channels are available to us and which channels are not available to us. In our case, our ACV is relatively high. It's it's probably kind of mid-market, almost enterprise type ACV, depending on the customer. We do serve very small customers, and we serve large customers as well. Our sweet spot is kind of between 200 to 5,000 employees, so kind of mid-market, I would call it. But our ACV actually opens up channels, which personally I find very fun. Like they're quite high touch channels. They're not necessarily super scalable channels. They're not going to get you 10,000 customers. They're going to get you 10 customers and then 20 customers and then 30 customers. So for us, the way we began was with a podcast. So we actually created a podcast before we had a product. And this was incredible for us because we were able to already go into the market and find our potential buyers. And before we even talked about sales or product or anything like that, we just said, look, we just want to have a conversation with you about this topic of mental health. And so before we had a product, a brand, or anything, we were able to attract some really good profiles to that, senior HR decision makers from, companies like Revolut, for example. That allowed us to build these strong relationships with key people within our market. And by the time we had a product launched, we already had a small group of people that we could go back to and say, we would love you to be part of this. Either you can be an early customer or, you can kind of get some access and you can give us some feedback. So we engaged really heavily with this small cohort of potential buyers. We gave them Amazon vouchers to do feedback sessions. We would share screen mock-ups, product mock-ups with them. We would really engage with this initial group. We actually closed our first few customers from that small cohort, and then we continued to do the podcast over time. And then we would introduce more and more channels. So we started a content hub, which is more written format, like a blog. But we tried to do it quite strategically. We said, and this I borrowed from my Typeform days, because we put a lot of investment into our content strategy and it really paid off for us. So what we did is we created a blog essentially, but we said we don't just want to create a blog. We want a beautiful blog. We want it to feel like a magazine, so that when we reach out to people and say, hey, can we interview you? Do you want to be part of this? They should feel proud to be part of it. They should look at it and think, of course I want to be part of this. Because we have no brand, right? We had nothing else to really entice them in, or no audience at that point. So that was really important. Create really good content that people really wanted to be a part of. And that meant we were able to interview and get quite close to people we would have not been able to get close to if we went straight for the sales approach. So I'll pause there for a second. I've got more that I can add on top, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing. Would love to hear more. I have a follow-up question. Do you advise someone who's starting with an unknown brand at the beginning, when you're attracting customers, do you advise to still sell your product at a premium if it's a premium product, or would you start with a pilot that's free and then showcase the power of your product and then charge? Which approach would you advise on?
Yeah, so it's a good question. In my opinion, so for Oliva, just to be specific, we didn't ever give it away for free. We never said to anybody, have this for free, to be our pilot customer. And the reason for that is, one, because we believed even from day one, what we had built was valuable. And you've got to think, in our product, there are people involved, right? We literally pay therapists and coaches to deliver a product. One, that's highly valuable. But two, if you bring on somebody for free, I think you will see a different level of feedback from them. You're not going to get the honest. It's not that you won't get honest feedback, but you're not going to get the same feedback as, compared to if they were a paying customer. So if they're a paying customer, they're going to be scrutinizing things a lot more. They're not going to be afraid to give you that constructive feedback because they're paying for it. There's real money leaving their bank accounts. Whereas if you give it to them as a gift for free, I don't think you're going to quite get the level of feedback you need to iterate as quickly. So my advice would be, if you can, if your market allows for it, try and make it a paid product from day one, but make concessions, right? So maybe it's a paid product, but with a discount. Maybe you offer a little bit more value, about your margin at that point. This isn't a revenue play for your first 5 or 10 customers. The revenue is not the important thing. The profit is not the important thing. The learnings are the important thing. So that would be my recommendation. and where possible, find early customers who are just super open to giving feedback and listen to that feedback. Don't try and impress them. Just try and learn from them. That would be my recommendation.
Amazing. So you leverage podcast marketing content. You got your few customers into the door. What were the next strategies to scale much faster?
Yeah. So we kept that going and we still keep that going today. We do it a little bit less now, but we got a bit of a kind of system and a machine behind that, and it worked quite well. As we started scaling from there, we did need to think, how do we get to more people? The podcast is great one at a time, but it's kind of like, like one every 2 weeks or something, right? And then you get cancellations and things like that. So it's quite slow. It's not creating a big pool of leads necessarily very quickly. So we went back to our map, like what is available to us. And of course, we could do SEO, we could do paid marketing, we could do affiliates, we could do partnerships. There's a million channels that you could do, but from all of my experience in marketing, less is more at the beginning. If you spread yourself too thinly, you won't do anything very well. So we wanted to choose what is our next channel to do well. And the reality is, like any marketing team, we've had to kind of go in and, we've had a lot of learnings, made a lot of mistakes, and we're still working it out to some extent. But I would say the next channel that started to work for us was an enhancement of our content strategy. So if you think of podcasts as very low volume but high quality relationships, then you've got our blog, which is slightly higher volume, but potentially slightly lower quality relationships because it's more like asynchronous, kind of back and forth, written articles, etc. Then we created something called Tough Conversations, which is a content platform where we interviewed people from the HR community, which is our buyer, and got their opinions about how to tackle the workplace's most difficult conversations. So something really important to us as a brand is that we don't want to shy away from the taboo topics around mental health. So, for example, we created a video series, all community driven, around how to talk about periods at work or death at work, for example. These difficult to talk about topics for some people, right? But we did that through the community. That wasn't content that we created, right? So we would reach out to people for them to record the videos, and we would do video interviews much like this one. And that was a really good way for us, one, to continue expanding our network and building high quality relationships with the people we were interviewing, but also they would then share it with their networks. And that would create this kind of growth loop where that community would grow. And now, that content platform, Tough Conversations, has over 1,000 really high quality people signed up to it, like senior people leaders of very large companies. So that's proven to be a really good way to attract and grow a bigger community around this space. And it has this knock-on effect of brand awareness and things like that. So that was kind of the next stage in the strategy. And that gave a bigger pool of leads for the sales team to start nurturing and to build stronger relationships with. So that scale was able to increase a little bit from the initial podcast days.
Amazing. This is a great strategy in your playbook. What did you have to unlearn from your days at Hotjar and Typeform? Because their focus is more B2C, which I know every company now has also an enterprise place, but when they started, they were more B2C. So is there anything that you had to unlearn and maybe recalibrate when you started your B2B play at your current organization?
Yeah, quite a lot actually, because Typeform was, in the early days when I started, like we were growing almost exponentially from product virality. So we had this incredible viral loop built into the product. So for anyone who knows Typeform, it's basically good looking forms and surveys, online forms and surveys. So when somebody created a Typeform, and they would then share it to collect responses. So they would share it, let's say, with 100 people, 1,000 people, sometimes 1 million people, etc., depending on the scale of their project. And though all of those people would be exposed to the great experience of a Typeform, because it was an incredible experience and was unlike anything people had seen in terms of forms and surveys previously, and we would have a little button saying powered by Typeform. That little button had enough people clicking on it and then thinking, well, I want to create a Typeform. And then it created this viral loop, which was incredible for our early growth. So that was amazing, but it was a luxury. It was a luxury to have that viral loop because as a marketer coming in, when I started, I looked at this, I was like, I can't start with SEO or paid marketing. Like it's going to be a drop in the ocean compared to what's happening here. So I need to think, how do I build a brand first? How do I build, it was a great opportunity to not have to do SEO and paid marketing, etc. So we started by building a really strong brand and doing incredible content, making a name for ourselves, positioning ourselves. And then later, when the viral loop started to plateau, all channels have an S-curve, right? All channels will start to plateau. I started introducing more traditional channels like SEO, paid marketing, and then they were able to become a significant driver of the revenue from that point. But all of that was kind of mass marketing. The viral loop was mass marketing. The paid marketing was mass marketing. The SEO was mass marketing. Like this was meant to get hundreds of thousands of people coming into the funnel because the account value of each customer, like you said, because it's kind of a B2C model, it's much, much lower. So things like events and things like that never worked. At Hotjar, it was similar. We didn't really have the same viral loop, a little bit, but not at the same level as Typeform. But it was still, quite a small average account value, which meant you had to get hundreds of thousands of people visiting your website, not just hundreds of people. So we did a lot of paid marketing. We did a lot of SEO, these kind of these channels, and it worked really well for those two companies. Coming into Oliva, I had to think, okay, I can do SEO, but it's a really young category in Europe. There's not that many people searching for what we're providing at the moment. There will be one day, but right now there isn't. So it's not going to have a massive impact, and it's going to take minimum of 6 months before I see results. And as an early stage company, you want to get going as quickly as possible. We can do paid marketing, but same thing. There's not loads of people searching for it. And, we all know how quickly you can lose a lot of money into trying to make paid work. So it just didn't feel like the right place to start. So I really thought back to basics, like what are these channels that don't necessarily scale? They're not going to get us in front of hundreds of thousands of people, but they will get us a really strong and happy initial customer base to create that referral machine and that word of mouth machine. And that seems to be working quite well so far.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing this. What's a principle that you live by that has served you well on your journey?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I've got a sophisticated answer, but my biggest learning, I would say, is the need to focus. I came originally from a creative background, and I had to kind of learn the results side of the numbers side of marketing. I came in from a much more kind of creative brand aspect, and then I kind of realized there's a scientific side of what I do that is as important, if not more important, than the creative side. When you come from that creative side, it's very easy just to kind of do cool stuff. You have one thing marketers are not short of is ideas. And also, anyone who's in marketing will know that everybody's got an opinion about marketing and a campaign we could do, or, let's do this, let's do that. So the ability to filter ideas and to prioritize them and to focus is probably the biggest thing I've had to learn, and probably the most impactful thing as well.
The previous guest has left you a question, and it is practically, would you have done anything differently than you have done currently at the start? Anything you would have changed when you were starting Oliva?
Yeah, almost certainly, yes. Yeah, I think I would have taken a more strategic and planned out approach to how we get those first 10, 50, 100 customers, and be a lot more kind of target driven. I was definitely, we were very scrappy. We had very few people in the team. So I was like, let's just start a podcast. Let's see what happens. But I wasn't really thinking, here's how I'm going to get my first 10. Here's how I'm going to get my first 50. That kind of happened by chance, if I'm being completely honest. And I think if I had taken that more kind of planned out approach, I probably would have spent a little less money over here. I would have wasted a little less time with this freelancer over here, etc. It could have been a lot more, a little bit more tighter in terms of the plan. But it's easy to say in hindsight.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not the first entrepreneur who, as a first-time founder suffers from this, because the playbook is out there. You can do all of the tactics that we shared here, but it's all about execution, and there's a huge element of luck involved in it. Being at the right place, right time, talking to the right people who might have the right pain point that you're looking to solve. So there's a lot of elements that play into that. So thank you for being transparent. Would you like to leave any question for the next guest? It could be a business question that you're currently contemplating and you need someone to help you solve it or advise you on it.
I'll give you my favorite interview question that I ask everybody I interview, and it's always very revealing. It's, what is the thing that people most misunderstand about you? And that's it. I find that question, it always reveals something about people's personalities, about how people perceive them, how they perceive themselves. So not really a business question, but it can provide some good answers.
Absolutely. It's very eye-opening. Thank you very much, Sancar, for sharing your story. What's next for Oliva?
Keep going. We're on a very important mission. We're working with some incredible companies like Remote.com, Scopely, the gaming company, these big global tech companies. So we really are starting to have an impact in these companies. We get really high engagement, really good satisfaction, NPS, all of that kind of stuff. So we just really want to get to as many of these companies as possible because it's having a real impact on individuals and businesses. So we're excited to keep going.
We definitely wish you the best of luck. How can people reach you, and are you hiring?
Thank you. So we are hiring for a few roles right now. Best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm not on Twitter or anything like that. So on LinkedIn, I'm quite active, and we're active on our company LinkedIn profile, and we publish all jobs there as well. So please do give us a follow, and we'll say hi over there.
Thank you very much for stopping by. The great mission that you're going after in the mental health world. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the First 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.